Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time. This is our 5th webinar in our 8-webinar series of how to be green, resilient, and save money, a do-it-yourself guide. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping rules. Please use the chat box to send us questions, and please do send us questions. Send it throughout the presentation. Don't wait to the end. We love questions, but 2 items. 1, use the chat box, not the Q&A box. We don't monitor that one. We monitor the chat box. And the chat box is viewable by everyone. So just so you know, be kind or what you might say, because everybody can see it. Everybody is muted because we are recording this. So again, the chat box is essential. So let's get started. I want to do a quick shout out to our co-sponsors. Cummins, our preferred choice for backup generation. Cummins, probably the highest quality guys out there. Pencat Corporation and Exergy have a long history together. If you need critical, resilient, and super quality power, Pencat are the guys to go to. If you got really, sensitive processes and things like that and need super power quality, Pencat's their people. Thank Hitachi, who's been backing us in the capital side for projects to help all of our customers. RPG Energy Group has been a partner of Exergy's for quite some time. And then Energy Storage Development Partners, possibly, at least my opinion, the best battery storage guys in the market, and really appreciate them supporting our efforts here. So let's do a quick quick introduction to Exergy and what do we do. So Exergy is a simple to use, easy to use marketplace for municipalities and businesses that want to be green, resilient, and save money. It's easy and painless. You basically just subscribe to our platform and we make you 100% green, 100% resilient, and typically save you between 10 and 15% on your energy spend. We're a fully automated platform. It's like buying from Amazon. It's that easy, but we take care of everything. We take care of sourcing renewables, delivering renewables, managing and installing backup generators and batteries, all that, all seamless for you. You don't even know we're there, but you're 100% green, 100% resilient, and you save money. But this webinar series is about do-it-yourself. So if you don't want to come to us and you want to do it yourself, that's fine. We're going to teach you how, and that's what each of these webinars is about. Today, we're going to talk about behind-the-meter solar, specifically for our customer base, which would be municipalities and businesses. We're not talking residential, we're not talking utility, we're talking commercial and industrial customers. We do it, but we wanted to sort of explain how we look at it, when we apply it, when we don't, because it is a little bit trickier than most people think. So we're going to take this in 3 parts, the way we've done every webinar. Part 1 is all solar is not the same. That doesn't mean there's different suns out there. We're going to give an example of a commercial solar project, and then we're going to discuss, is there a better way? The important thing about this webinar is we're not asking a question of whether solar is good. Solar is absolutely good. But what we want to discuss is what is the right solar for you. So while solar technology is basically the same, the costs and value differ a lot by its application. So one of the first places we turn to, or a customer says, I want to be green, the first thing they think of is we should put solar on our rooftop or something. So 78% of the major companies in the country, and that's, and when I say major, it's the top like 10,000 or so. 78% they want to purchase more green, renewable energy, and they would love to be 100% green if possible. Their first thought is to install solar. The question we have is this the best use of the resources and capital for the company that wants to be green? Solar is certainly going to play a part, but what's the best way of getting there, and where does behind the meter solar stand? So the first and most important thing to understand is solar is not a monolithic market. The technology is the same whether I'm building a 100 megawatt site or I'm building a 3 kilowatt site on my house. The technology is the same, the parts are basically the same, et cetera, et cetera. But the markets for these and the costs are substantially different. There are 3 primary or distinct solar markets. The utility scale, which is larger systems, typically 10 megawatts or larger, and they're connected directly to the grid. Then you have the residential side. This is home rooftop systems, and they're typically net metered, meaning they overproduce during the day and get to spin their meters backwards, and the utility, keeps track of all that. And that's typically in the order of 2 to 3 kilowatts to maybe 9 or 10 kilowatts. So there's a huge difference between that utility scale and the residential side. On the commercial and industrial, these tend to be smaller to medium-sized systems. So typically 50 kilowatts to 500 kilowatts or something like that. This is the area we're going to focus on in this webinar series. Now, I do want to do a little bit of a spoiler alert. The commercial and industrial market in some ways hasn't been served as well as it should, because a lot of people who did residential solar went in to do commercial and industrial and overestimated the savings. And we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail. And it has to do with the tariff structures, and the costs are very different for commercial and industrial players than they are for residential. So here's to give you an idea of the comparative sizes of the market. The gray is the utility scale. The light blue is the commercial and industrial.
Dave, if you're still there, you seem to have cut out for a second.
Very well.
Hey, Dave, you cut out there for a second when you got to industrials. Could you start over from there, please? We only lost about 5 seconds of you. Dave, are you there?
Hello.
Yes, you are back.
I am back. I am so sorry. I have no idea what happened. Welcome to Zoom universe here. So on this is just a comparative of the general market sizes. So you can see what's really fueled solar in the United States has been the utility scale. And when you read in the news about, solar is now cheaper than natural gas and everything else, what they're really talking about is those utility scale players out there. We know that intimately. We built 425 megawatts of utility scale solar, so we know the space very, very well. The most important thing to see, though, is that the commercial and industrial space, the solar has actually been declining. It was flat for a while, and it's now declining. So if solar was such a great deal and the costs were so low and all of these great things, why is commercial and industrial solar not, essentially accelerating and growing much faster? Well, there's a few items here that is, makes it difficult for commercial and industrial solar. So first one is commercial and industrial enjoy much lower power prices. Since the solar itself is basically the same technology, the capital cost is going to be reasonably the same, let's say, unless you're doing utility scale. The lower the energy price, the less savings you're going to have. And we'll get into this in a little bit more detail. The other thing is that businesses have more complex tariffs with demand charges. And solar only produces during certain parts of the day. So depending upon what your demand looks like, what your load looks like, the value of the solar can change dramatically. And again, we're talking businesses here. Many of them have very complex real estate issues. You want to put solar on your rooftop. What if you don't own the building? And you have a lease on the building, and the lease, and you would love to have solar for 15 or 20 years, but you only have a 5-year lease. are you going to be around? Who's going to take responsibility for that? Those types of things. Do you go directly to the business owner? So it can get time consuming and expensive to really go through these real estate issues. The next one is, and I don't mean this in any way negative to business, but they tend to have a shorter planning horizon. You want a long power purchase agreement to make the thing finance and, save money. But as a business, you know that you constantly have to adapt and evolve. And can you really say that your business is going to be the same 15 years from now or 20 years from now, let alone how is it going to be different 5 years from now? So do you really want to take on a long-term asset, whose asset life, solar is typically 30 years, might be 5 or 6 times longer within your planning horizon? The fifth one here, and this is the one that is one of the most important, is the tax benefits are hard to use. As you know, there are tax credits and accelerated depreciation on these projects. If the business is big enough that it can use those tax benefits, that's fantastic. But the reality is, because it's so capital intensive, typically the investment tax credit can't be used by the commercial and industrial player, or can't be used quickly. They might be able to use it over the next 10 or 15 years, but the time value of money, you really want to use it immediately. Now, in the other two markets, the utility scale market, which is much larger, the tax benefits are held by people called tax equity investors. And they're typically banks and insurance companies and things like that. And they buy this up in order to support renewables and to reduce their tax bill. They won't do smaller projects. And the reason for that is doing tax equity, the contracts, the monitoring, the legal expenses are enormous. You're not going to do a tax equity investment legal-wise for probably under $50,000. So it's a real impediment. So unless the company can use it, it's very difficult to monetize those tax benefits. Roofs are often a difficult issue. Again, if I'm doing a utility scale, I'm putting it on the ground and pounding posts in there. But now I got a 30-year asset going on somebody's roof that is 20 years old. Do I put a new roof on? Do I not put a new roof on? There's lots of speculation about, well, if you put, your roof will be covered with the tax credit. Not always the case. The IRS has gotten a lot tougher on that. So roofs tend to be a difficult item. And I just wanted to mention this, the cost of doing solar for commercial and industrial rooftops is typically about 2 times the cost of doing it at the utility scale. So when you see those numbers and they say, solar is cheaper than natural gas and everything else, they're talking about utility scale. And as I said, we've built 425 megawatts of this. We could build utility scale solar for under $1 a watt. But smaller project, going on a rooftop, dealing with those and the permitting issues and everything else, you're looking more between $2 and $3 a watt when you get into the commercial and industrial space. So when I said that less savings were available, and I apologize for not having the attribution here, this is from the Energy Information Administration. This is just the beginning of this year up through April. What are the average electricity costs being paid for in the United States? These are the average across the country for residential, commercial, and industrial. So what they did was they took the average bill, just took the total cost divided by the total kilowatt hours, and it comes up to, and this is in cents per kilowatt hour. So if we look at this, we'll notice that residential rates are double that of the industrial rates. So the cost of putting solar on a rooftop for a residence is not much more expensive than putting it on the rooftop of a commercial building. But the savings are going to be less than half because the commercial building doesn't pay as much for its energy in general. Next, what we'll get into is the complication as it relates to how those tariffs are actually structured. So let's build a commercial solar project here together. So we're doing this on an industry average basis. taking a small commercial building, and we're cutting like a swath across the middle of the country, okay? It's going to be here. It's not going to be in the desert in California, and it's not going to be under the snow in Maine. We're cutting through the middle of the country. So for this customer, he does about 123,000 kilowatt hours per year of consumption. Insolation area, which basically means how much sunlight does that area have? As I said, we're slicing the country kind of in the middle. It's also referred to as the capacity factor, is about 1,400 kilowatt hours per kilowatt peak, which is pretty standard. It's a good planning number. The average energy price here we're using is 12 cents. If you go back, you'll see that industrial was 6 and commercial was 10 or something, or 13 or something. We took the high end of a range and said, let's just use 12 cents, okay? This is also the standard commercial tariff structure, which is comprised of energy plus demand. And the demand is usually two types. There's transmission demand, which are transmission charges, which are based upon the peak load that you have on the grid at specific times. And then there's the local utility demand, which is based on how much load you have any 15 minutes during the day for a month, right? So whatever it is, it doesn't matter what the grid is doing, the highest demand that you put on the utility for 15 minutes. Now, initially we set our goal to offset 100% of electricity. All right, again, remember where Exergy is coming from. We're gonna make you 100% green, so we wanted to offset 100% of our fossil energy. But we do have some limited roof space. Trying to make this realistic, there's no ground mount area available, so it's gotta be rooftop. We're in an industrial park, there's nothing there. We did think about carport solar. I mean, everybody loves carport solar. You get shade, and it doesn't rain on you and things like that. But carport solar is much, much more expensive. So take that, $2 to $3, maybe double that before if you want to do carport. So it just wasn't in the mix for us in this analysis. So let's take a look at what the electric bill is for this sort of average customer. And it's not a big bill. I mean, they're only paying, $15,000, $16,000 a year or something like that. But what's important here is the structure of the bill. You'll notice that there's energy charges and there's demand charges. So of this bill, energy, the actual electrons, represent only half, less than half of the bill. Demand charges, which are based on this 15-minute window, any time during the day for an entire month, and it's done each month, that's 40% of the bill, which means we still got about 10% that's other things we're not going to get around, like customer charges and other expenses like that. So this is what we're looking at from a bill perspective. All right, so let's get to our design. So we wanted to cover about 100% of our usage. That would say, if again, given that we're at 1,400 kilowatt peak, we'd need about 90 kilowatts of solar. So we sort of size this thing out, and we're being rough and dirty here, and we're being as aggressive as possible. If we assume we're using 330 watt panels at standard sizes, et cetera, we'd need 273 panels for that 90 kilowatts, or 5,300 square feet. Don't have that space, just don't have it. This client had 5,000 square feet of usable space, so we can't put on 90. So we fit in whatever we could, which comes out to about 81 kilowatts, just the reality. So we're not gonna get to be 100% green in this case anyway. The full turnkey project cost for this is $2.20 per watt. And again, going back to utility, utility can be anywhere from 95 to 98 cents per watt. This is $2.20. And if you doubt it, we've built many behind the meter C&I sites. For this size of a project, that 220 is on the low side in our experience so far. And this is going to tend to be pretty aggressive on sizing. This is literally butting up the solar panels against each other in all directions. Going to be hard to service and maintain it, but we use it for an example. So let's see what this does to us, our load, and our savings. So the sky blue plus the dark blue dotted line, that dark blue dotted line is what our load looks like on average. And this isn't too surprising. Remember, this is the middle of the country. This is average over the year. What you typically see in a commercial building is the building's pretty much dead during the night. Sometime around 6 or 7 o'clock, things start to happen. So they turn on the air conditioners, they turn on the lights, or they turn on the heat, you know, and all that kind of great stuff. So there's a fairly rapid rise in peak happening between 8 and 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And then it starts to roll off during the day, again, because the building catches up. Let's say it's heating. Once it gets to its temperature, then maintaining it is pretty easy. So the green is our solar. So notice that our solar production doesn't really fit the peak profile that we have. And the blue, the sky blue line is the net. It's the net of the solar, or the total load. The blue dash line minus the green dash line is the sky blue one. This is the residual. So you'll see that in the morning, we still have a fair amount of peak demand charge there. In the middle of the day, around 2, 3 o'clock at night, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're overproducing. So we're just essentially exporting it to the grid. And then as it rolls off toward the end of the day and is basically dead by 6 o'clock at night, and obviously our load peaks back up again. But this is a commercial building, so there's not a whole lot of load, after 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. The key here is how the solar and the peak load correspond in time. So it's not perfectly matched, and that has a substantial impact on your savings. So how much do we really save here? So if I step back and said all we were doing was buying electricity, theoretically, we should save 90%. That's the 81 kilowatts that we could actually build versus the 90 kilowatts that we actually needed to be 100% green. So we should get 90% of the savings. The reality is we're not. We're only saving about 58% of our bill. So rather than the $15,000, we're only saving $8,600. And the reason for that lack of savings is because the solar output and the peak demand usage are not perfectly aligned. So while we're doing some reduction in our peak demand, the peak demand is still higher than we would like it, and we can't get around it by overproducing more solar. Isn't going to do us any good because it's happening at 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, not at 9 o'clock in the morning when our peak, actual peak load is. Now that $8,600 will decline about 0.5% a year, probably more than that. The 0.5% a year is just the degradation. The panels are not as efficient, and they decline in their efficiency about 5% every year. You still have to provide the operation and maintenance. People have to go up there and clean it and do all those kinds of things, and that usually has an inflation rate. We just ignored that for the purpose of this analysis. So we're really looking at, we're going to offset 90% of our electricity and save only less than 60%. What that does mean is now that percentage of the bill that is allocated to demand charges actually is going up. So we went from, it was like 40%, now it's up into the 70 or 80% range. So we're really paying the grid for things that we're not using. So how does this work with us, like, say, return on investment? Now, I want to go back and remind everybody that we said one of the biggest difficulties with commercial and industrial solar are the tax benefits, the investment tax credits specifically. Many companies can't use them or can't use them fast enough. And if you think about a small commercial operation, just the way their accounting works, many times they try to obviously minimize double taxation. So what they do is they'll try and move as much in compensation things to the P&L in order to reduce dividends and distributions to the owners, which are going to get taxed again. So many times C&I customers do not have a very, very large tax bill to offset. And this is a tax credit, meaning it comes directly off your tax liability. And since corporate taxes are now, and I'm rounding, at 20%, my taxable income would have to be 5 times that in order to use the investment tax credit that, at 26%. So looking at this, if the company could use all of the investment tax credits and the depreciation in the first year, that's absolutely the best. And we've got our $8,600 in savings declining at 0.5% a year. The return on investment is about 2.2%. 2.2%. I know very, very few, actually zero, business owners and things that are going to divert capital from growing their business for a 2.2% return. Reality is it's probably worse than that because they probably can't use the ITC all at once. They're going to have to essentially save it and use it over the next 10 years or so. At that point, it even drops below 2%. So for this customer, in this commercial and industrial customer, to me, it's hardly a slam dunk on investment return. Now, there may be other extenuating factors as we want to be 100% green. We want, it's important to us, it's important to our customers and all that. Totally get that. And that may be sufficient, sufficient value there to take a much lower return. But what we ask you to do is to step back and say, is there a better way? We're not giving up on our goal to be 100% green. We just want to do it in the most economic, cost-effective manner whatsoever. So is there a better way? And there really is a better way. And that's us, really. Exergy's always on, always green solution is a better solution. Because what we do is we supply 100% renewable energy to you, but we buy it, or we acquire it less expensively from utility scale renewables. Remember, the fastest, highest growth rate and lowest cost is utility scale renewables. It's less than half the expense to build a utility scale than it is to put solar on your rooftop. So it makes much more sense for us to bring you renewables from much more efficient, cost-effective utility scale and deliver it to you over the grid. Now, we protect you with that because you would say as well, if the grid was down, if I had rooftop solar, at least I would be, powered some of the time. Yeah, you would be powered some of the time if the sun was out and you're only working during those solar hours. What we do is we also install a natural gas backup generator, and we will keep you running even if the grid goes down. So is there a better way? Yeah, we'll make you 100% green. We'll make you 100% resilient. We'll save you 10 to 15% on your current spend, and you don't have to put anything up front. There's no cost, there's no investment. Essentially, you're getting in, rather than a 2% return, think of it as an infinite rate of return. Well, that's all well and good, but shouldn't I be taking a hedge position here? Like thinking about it and saying, energy prices are going to go up. Maybe I want to have rooftop solar to protect me and to hedge my position. Well, let's look at the outlook. Energy, this is from the Energy Information Administration. Energy prices are forecasted to fall 10% over the period. The period is the next 5 years, in response to the continued low-cost natural gas and the declining cost of renewables. So, as we said, those utility-scale renewables are helping to drive the cost of energy down. That's where you want to buy it. The cost of natural gas is driving down the cost of energy. Though you look at your bill and you'd say, hey, my energy or my electricity bill has been going up every year for the past 5 years. Yes, but the energy portion of it has actually been declining. And what is growing is your transmission and distribution charges. Because that's where the demand charges come from. And as those continue to grow, if you don't have your solar behind the meter matched to your peak load, you can't get away from those. And their savings, even though the cost of the solar goes down, your savings are going to continue to, I'm going to say, get mitigated or evaporate because of those transmission and distribution charges. In the Exergy model, we reduce those transmission and distribution charges by using a backup generator and how we essentially present your load to the grid at very specific times during the day. So sort of on the summary side of this is rooftop behind the meter solar a good idea for commercial and industrial players? On average, we think solar is great. We think there's a better way to do it. If you want to be 100% green, come to us. Let's do it at the sort of the utility scale. If it isn't, and you want to do it, please be careful where you attempt to do this. Understand what your load is. Make sure you understand how the solar is going to offset those demand charges. Get a really good analysis, because what we have found with many commercial and industrial customers, they put solar in and they came back and said, you know what, I'm not saving any money. And the reason, though they were expecting to, it's because their peak demand charges didn't overlap their solar, and therefore they didn't get as much benefit as they had expected. Dave, do we have any questions?
It looks like the only question has to do with which markets is Exergy operating in today for solar and its full model?
So Exergy operates in the deregulated markets. So that is New England, New York, PJM, which is the Mid-Atlantic states, MISO, which is sort of the Chicago, Detroit area, California, ERCOT, which is Texas, and the Southern Power Pool. All of those are deregulated markets that make it easy to participate in. The Exergy model relies on the ability to be able to move energy across the grid. So I'm buying utility scale, low cost renewable, I have to move it to you. So I need to be able to move it, and that requires a deregulated market. Any other questions, Dave?
Nope, that looks like it today.
All right, so quick wrap up. You want to be green, you want to be resilient. As I said, this is a do-it-yourself webinar. This was the 5th. Next week is, how to understand your tariff, what you can and can't do in order to save money, and things like that. I will be totally candid and honest. We are teaching you how to do what Exergy does for those who want to do it yourself. So we'll teach you how to be green, to be resilient, and how to save money. You will find you will actually save money and a lot of brain cells and stress just coming to us, because we've got it all built out. We have all of the automation. Everything is fully automated with regard to handling the backup generator, demand response, peak shaving, and things like that. So hope to see you again soon, and if you hope to see you next week on our next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. The call will end now.